non-auto access to the site, so walking, biking, and transit use. As part of this city-led precise plan and EIR process, Council asked staff to prepare project alternatives to that proposed Longfellow project, to study really through the entire California Environmental Quality Act at the same level as the project. So we're going to be studying both that project as well as a project alternative, again, at the same level. Before we get into those preliminary alternatives, we want to just share some of what we heard through this process. This is only a small amount of that, as you all know. But through the planning commissions, council meetings, and then all of our listening sessions through this project, we heard a number of issues that were raised through that process. Those included increased traffic, construction impacts associated with noise, delivery, truck traffic, and handling of materials on site. We heard about potential impacts associated with building on the landfill, insufficient oversight of the life sciences industry, and then impacts from both construction and operation on the local ecosystem and habitat around the area and into the Belmont Slough. We also heard about the impacts of a hotel, including night lights, as well as traffic to the area. So as we consider those concerns, and we combine them with other community feedback we heard about the urban design strategies, as well as our site plan analysis and the development principles that were crafted earlier in the process, these really all help to shape the alternatives that you're going to get an opportunity to hear a little bit more about, but then speak to later this evening. From that community feedback and analysis, there are a few design themes that really emerged as part of this analysis. One is around the total project size and scale. The second is around the location and height of the buildings. The third is how far those buildings are set back from the property line, the southeast and northeast property line, adjacent to existing homes and Marine Parkway, and then adjacent to the Belmont Slough as well. Street location and parking access near existing residential neighborhoods, and then the amount and location of amenities and the greenway overall. So based on those themes, a couple of alternatives were developed to facilitate a conversation around these urban design strategies. The proposed Longfellow development project is on the top of the screen, and you can see these two alternatives. These alternatives are really intended to test different urban design strategies that help to try and address some of those concerns that were identified through the process. And rather than go through each of these individually, as you know I didn't do in that presentation, what we're going to do is break them into a series of simpler diagrams so that we can more simply describe those options. But before we get into those illustrations, this table shows some basic statistics about the existing conditions, what's on site now, the proposed Longfellow development project, and then those two preliminary project alternatives. I'm going to walk through this table, but don't worry about memorizing it. A lot of this information is on the following slides that you can see. So on the top row, we have building size. So as I mentioned, there are 20 buildings currently on the site. There's total about 1 million square feet. The proposed project has 15 buildings, and there is an approximately 2.35 million square foot increase in the amount of square feet on site, total 3.3 million square feet. Alternative one consists of 13 buildings and an additional 2.1 million net new square feet on site, which is about a 10% decrease from that proposed project alternative. And then the last alternative 2, houses 12 buildings and reduces the project size by about 20% to 1.9 million square feet of net new development on the site. The hotel remains in all of the alternatives. Public open space increases from about 4.5 acres on the site currently to 30 acres with the project, and then the alternatives add 3 to 5 additional acres respectively with the removal of buildings. And then finally, setbacks increase for the two project alternatives as compared to the proposed Longfellow development project, with the average distances from the property line adjacent to the existing neighborhoods, southeast and northeast sides of the site, increasing from an average of about 135 feet to 225 feet to 270 feet. respectively. Slough setbacks increased from 80 to 160 feet. And likewise, with fewer square feet overall in the project alternatives, reduce the number of parking stalls concurrently. So through our listening sessions, we heard the proposed development project was too many square feet, too tall, and that those taller buildings were a little too close to the neighbors. So several example design strategies and responses we tested include reducing the number of buildings, especially close to the neighbors, lowering the heights in specific locations, and reducing the overall project size to help reduce both the size and the visual impact of the project. This map illustrates the proposed building heights and location for the proposed Longfellow development project. So the darker blue colors that you can see on the map, these represent the tallest buildings. Those are proposed for up to 90 to 100 feet, or about 6 stories in height. The medium blue buildings are about 75 to 90 feet, or about 5 stories in height. And then the lightest blue buildings are under 60 feet. Those buildings tend to be the parking structure and the community amenities building. So again, that proposed Longfellow development project added 2.35 million net new square feet to the site, totaling 3.3 million. This map illustrates the proposed building heights and locations for alternative number 1. So this alternative removes building N12 on the northeast property line and lowers the building and garage heights along the property line. It also lowers the building heights in kind of the center area of the site to help reduce the visual impact on the neighbors in the community. Alternative 1 adds 2.1 million net new square feet to the site with that hotel, totaling 3.07 million square feet. That's a reduction of about 245,000 square feet, or 10%. Alternative 2 illustrates the proposed building heights and locations for alternative 2, excuse me. So building alternative 1, this option removes both building N12 on that side and building N7 on these sides. So these are 2 of the buildings closest to the neighbors. It lowers building heights, reduces the size and widths, as well as sets back those parking structures on the edge, and lowers, like alternative 1, lowers the building heights in sort of the center of the site at the highest point. So again, alternative 2 adds about 1.9 million net new square feet with that hotel, totaling 2.86 million square feet. That's a reduction of about 459,000 square feet, or 20%. So now I'm going to show just a few visualizations of what some of this looks like to complement some of the maps. This is a visualization of N12. So we're kind of in the northeast corner of the site, as you can see from that red diagram. This is the existing condition on the site now, and the key map in that corner really shows you where you're at. So you'll see that throughout the evening. This is the proposed Longfellow project with existing landscaping in place. It does not show any new landscaping, it's just the same as it is now. This illustration shows the proposed Longfellow development project with additional new landscaping around that property line. And then this illustration shows that preliminary draft alternatives for the same location with the existing landscaping in place. So garage 3 is here, and it's set back further from the property line, and then building N12, which was right there, has been removed and replaced with open space and landscaping. And here's what it would look like with the proposed landscape. Through our listening sessions, we also heard about the proposed development project had buildings that were too close to the neighbors and too close to the Belmont Slough. So we tested a number of urban design strategies related to setbacks from the neighborhoods and the slough, as well as removing some of the buildings, as you saw in the previous slide, again, all to reduce that visual impact on the neighborhood. So this map illustrates those building setbacks for the Longfellow development project, really related to the eastern edge of the site, so the northeast and southeast part of the site. The map includes the black lines. Those show the setback from the property line, and the blue lines show the distance from the closest home or neighbor. In particular, you can see that the setback is measured to the property line. However, we do want to make sure that people recognize that on the other side of the fence, in many cases, like along Marine Parkway, it's open space to the area north of Island Drive. It's people's backyards, and here to drive aisle and parking. So on average, the buildings are about 135 feet from the property line, and that distance, again, is a little less at Island Drive and Marine Parkway, approximately 95 feet from the property line. But again, it increases to 150 feet closer to the homes and 185 feet closer to homes on the side. Garages G2 and G3 are the closest buildings to the homes. Those are 170 and 180 feet from the site. And again, part of the reason the closest buildings are N1 and 2 at the entrances, they are set back from Marine Parkway or that existing open space. Alternative 1 is shown here on this map, and the average building setbacks increased to about 225 feet. Like the proposed development project, the setback distance again is also less here at the entrance from Marine Parkway and Island Drive, increasing to about 105 feet in the options from the property line. And then you can see 450 feet and 230 feet. That increased setback there is the removal of building N12. Again, garages G2 and G3 are still the closest to existing homes, but that distance has been increased from about 170 feet to 250 feet, again, to reduce that visual impact on the site. And you can see the distance between these two main buildings, N1 and N2 at the entrance, are about 400 to 500 feet from homes on either side. This map shows the proposed building setbacks in alternative number 2. So on average, these are about 270 feet from the property line. Again, like alternatives 1 and the proposed plan, the closest buildings from the setback are N1 and N2 at the entrance. Those are about 105 feet from the property line. Again, here the setbacks have increased to 450 feet and then 620 with the removal of the buildings N7 and N12. This set of illustrations shows cross sections from the southeast property line parking G2. You can see the key map up there in the right-hand corner. The illustrations on the left show the change in setback area in greenway open space between the existing condition, the proposed development project, and the project's alternatives. The top image shows the existing condition. Currently, you can see the building is set back with some open space and parking. The middle image shows the proposed Longfellow development project, and that's set back about 95 feet from the property line with that strip of open space, landscaping, and then Longfellow lane between the property line and the building. You can see alternative 2 increases the setback from the property line from about 95 feet to 200 feet and removes Longfellow lane. So this essentially moves the parking structure to about 250 feet from the existing homes on the other side of the fence line. This illustration shows buildings N1 and N2. So these are an entrance, as you can see up there on the right-hand side, to the site from Marine Parkway and Island Drive. Those again are two of the closer buildings to the neighbors. So on the top left, you see the proposed Longfellow development project. That illustration shows the distance between the existing homes on the one side and the proposed project. That's approximately 500 feet distance. Again, this is really set back only 95 feet from the property line, but you have this increase in open space between those buildings and Marine Parkway. And then the bottom illustration shows alternatives 1 and 2. So with that additional setback from 95 to 105 feet, we're also stepping the building back a little bit to reduce visual impact on the neighborhood. And then also looking at ways to reconfigure the upper floor mechanical to reduce the impact on the neighbors and community. So the next several images are going to show visualizations from Marine Parkway and at Island Drive, so you can kind of see what this looks like overall. So this one shows the existing conditions currently. What you can see here is this strip of open space. This is actually in front of the site. So the Redwood Life site is actually set back about 100 feet from the entrance to Marine Parkway. This illustration shows the proposed Longfellow development project. The property line again is about 100 feet back from Marine Parkway. So while it's only set back 95 feet from the property line, the buildings are about 200 feet from Marine Parkway. These illustrations show the proposed Longfellow project on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side you can see the alternatives. The intent of these alternatives is to show the visual impact from Marine Parkway. So you can see with the additional step back of the upper stories and pushing the building back, you can see it helps to reduce the visual impact from Marine Parkway. So all of those buildings are about 200 feet from the street itself. So we also heard about setbacks to the slough and impacts on the edge of the wildlife along the edge. And so this map shows the setbacks from the slough itself. And this is the proposed project. Those setbacks range from about 80 to 100 feet to the slough edge. Alternatives 1 and 2 set the buildings back further from the Belmont Slough. So buildings are set back approximately 160 feet from the slough edge. There are still streets and paths in this space, but there is more distance between the buildings and slough, more opportunities for planting, more opportunities for shading not to hit the slough itself. And then here are a couple of cross sections, again, for what that looks like. So this is building N13, so you can see it's up in the top corner, so we're talking about the kind of the northwestern edge of the site, adjacent to the slough. The illustrations on the left show the setback area, the Bay Trail along the edge, an open space, as well as Bridge Parkway. The top is the existing site condition, proposed project, and the alternative. The middle image shows the proposed alternative, the proposed Longfellow development project. That building, you can see the Bay Trail, the open space, Bridge Parkway, and then some landscaping with a step back of the building away from the slough. Alternative 1 changes the building from a life sciences building to a parking garage, and the structure is set back 160 feet, so you can see that greater setback, approximately 80 feet more from the slough. It's also, because it's a change from a life science building to a parking structure, the overall height, it's a little tricky to see on this image, but the overall height has been reduced by 30 feet as well. So through our listening sessions, we also heard that the proposed Longfellow project, Longfellow Lane and parking access were a little too close to the neighbors. Several of the design responses we tested and the alternatives included shifting the lane further into the site, reducing the size of the structures, and generally lowering the amount of parking on the site. And by lowering the amount of parking on the site, it really constrains the number of vehicles coming to the site each day. So this map illustrates the proposed Longfellow Lane in orange and the proposed parking structure location in orange for the project. You can see the lane running along the property line here with access to those garages. So this map shows the new location for Longfellow Lane and the parking structures in alternatives 1 and 2. So the street has been shifted from this edge into the site, with accessing the garages happening from internal to the site. The structure sizes themselves have been reduced in height and reduced in width and set back further from the neighbors. Also, as I mentioned with the previous slides, one of the life sciences buildings, N13, has been replaced with parking, shifting that parking function further from the residential neighborhood. We also heard through our listening sessions that the community amenity space was still too far from neighbors, and that there was an opportunity to create an amenity storage space in the greenway. So we tested a number of urban design strategies, including moving the community amenity building closer to the neighborhoods, and then also expanding the greenway to include more opportunities for things like programming, planting overall. This is a map showing the proposed project, community amenities in the greenway, for the proposed Longfellow development project. The proposed project has about 30 acres of open space with a 46,000 square foot amenity space with community multi-purpose room and gym. In our alternatives, this is alternative 1, we tested shifting that community amenity space closer from N3 down to N2, closer to the edge of the site, making it easier to access from the neighborhood, incorporating it into a mixed-use life sciences building. The alternative would include 33 acres of public open space with an increase in greenway width, as you can see along the edge, in this option with the removal of N12. And this alternative number 2, again, shifts that community amenity space closer to the neighborhood, again, increasing the width overall of the greenway with the removal of N12 and N7 to provide, again, more opportunities for programming, open space, and planting overall. This insanely dense slide really summarizes some of those urban design strategies and their implications for the alternatives that we just proposed. So alternative 1 removes 2 buildings and reduces the overall amount of life sciences by 244,000 square feet, or about 10% from the proposed project. Alternative 2 removes an additional building, N7, and reduces the project by about 459,000 square feet, or 20%. The alternative 1 increases the setbacks from the property line from 135 to 225 feet on average, with alternative 2 increasing the setbacks to 270 feet on average. Again, buildings are set back from the Belmont Slough to 160 feet from 80 to 100 feet. Both alternatives shift Longfellow Lane internal to the site, reduce those garages' heights and widths along the edge of the site, and then moves one further away from the property line. And then both alternatives move the community amenity space closer to the neighborhood into a mixed-use building. Both alternatives increase the greenway width along the edge and the additional open space. So, next steps. It was a very long presentation. You are all hanging in there. I appreciate it. So after this round of engagement on the project, our goal is to have a preferred CEQA project alternative that we can initiate that CEQA analysis on. Once that is confirmed, we'll initiate the project development and the CEQA studies, which will include evaluation of the potential impacts of the project and the project alternative, including detailed technical analysis of the transportation and utilities system and more. We'll also be doing a deep dive on community benefits and fiscal impacts for the 2 options because they will be different. And then we will be estimating costs for the transportation and utilities infrastructure as well. We'll also be, it's not listed on here, but kicking off and starting to draft the policies and standards that are part of the precise plan itself. You all know this probably, if you don't. You can stay involved in a number of different ways. We have this meeting tonight. We've also concurrently launched an online survey. It's exactly the same information here. This presentation has been recorded and it's up on the website, so you can get it at redwoodlife.com. We also have a update to the City Council and Planning Commission on March 4th, and I hope to see you all there as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave, who's going to tell you about the workshop stations, and then we'll have some clarified questions. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. Okay, pop quiz. If everyone paid attention, should we give you a couple questions to answer right off the bat? No? Okay, here we go. So the stations that are set up around the room, as you can see, mirror everything that you just heard, basically. Because again, the most important thing tonight is to get feedback from you all. So station here is just about the overall process for those that maybe aren't familiar with how we got to where we are, the overall schedule, where we're headed. The station here starts with the project size and building location. And at this station, you have information that basically mirrors what Eric just presented, and then you have an opportunity to give us feedback on basically what you agree or maybe don't agree on, general feedback along a matrix. So we'd love for you to visit the station, and each of the stations will have that same general pattern. So we'll start there. Then we'll move to building setbacks. Also this all kind of feeds off each other, right? So the same thing gives you some information, and then most importantly, we'll ask for your feedback. And next to that, you'll have the slough setbacks as well as the sea level rise and flood resilience boards. So you'll have an opportunity to give feedback along this wall on those topics. In the back corner, we have our mobility station. So everything transportation, demand related, that would be a great place to go visit. You'll have an opportunity to put dots along the scale and also give us feedback there. And then in the back of the room, we also have the community amenities and greenway station. Again, this mirrors everything that you just heard, more information on the board in case you missed anything that Eric so eloquently put here a second ago. And then you'll have a chance again to provide some feedback. And then the final station is going to be a summary of all of these design strategies in one place for you to be able to give feedback to, and then also let us know if there's anything else that we missed. Intentionally, we're not going to put that board up until about 15 minutes into the open house, because we'd love for you to visit all of the other boards to gather that feedback, and specifically on these different topics before you get to this final board. So we'll go ahead and put it up then. And this is an open house, so once you give your feedback, you're free to leave. We want to really respect your time. But again, we're hoping to leave a good hour to allow you to give that feedback and ask any questions that you might have. So again, we're just bringing this up before we get into the clarifying questions piece of the agenda, as we promised. Again, we really want to create a safe space is our goal here. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to contribute in a manner that's kind of safe for them, so all perspectives are able to kind of share again in this environment. So we just want to kind of remind you of some of these rules of engagement. And with that, so we're going to test out something new here tonight. We're going to ask you to start to line up, if you can, down the center aisle. I'm going to have a mic that I'm going to hand you, and these are really just clarifying questions about the presentation. So if there's anything that maybe kind of didn't make sense to you that you have a clarifying question about, but really we want all your questions and comments to go on the boards around the room. So I would really suggest you can ask questions about the alternatives and the urban design strategies, but the comments, again, we'd love to get those comments and feedback directly on the board. So anything you have to share about the alternatives could wait till the open house. But we'd love to answer any initial questions here. We're allowing about 10 to 15 minutes for this, so we have enough time to get to the rest of the show. So with that, I'm going to talk to you.
Thank you. So first I'd like to thank staff, consultants, and the developer for really taking the community's input and concerns to heart and generating these alternatives. The question I have is, have you considered, instead of eliminating buildings, adding buildings, and that way, and maybe even widening buildings to reduce some of the green space within the buildings so that the heights can continue to be brought down? Because as it stands now, I mean, we're still looking at 100-foot tall buildings, which was kind of the biggest concern going forward. You know, the Oracle buildings, 500, that's 90 feet, so having 12, 13, 15 of those types of buildings, lower buildings would be easier to screen in, yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's honestly a comment and or suggestion we'd love to hear really in this station here, but Eric, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that before we get to...
I'm sorry, one more thing, the hotel. I mean, if the goal is to give the tenants room to grow, isn't the hotel taking up a lot of valuable real estate when we have so many hotels, one right here on Dolphin and surrounding area.
Great, thanks, Roy. That's a good comment. On the question about increasing the number of buildings on the site and reducing the height, so overall, that is something we looked at. We talked to our our economics consultant, and there is kind of a height where buildings don't become feasible anymore, and that's typically around 4 stories right now for life sciences around the region. And so we look at that as kind of a threshold, and this site is a little bit more complicated than the average site in the region, given that it's on the landfill. There are other things in consideration. So that was one of the factors that we considered as part of that overall.
So I have 2 unrelated questions. In the video, it said that when they were talking about moving the amenities center, that when they move it, it becomes mixed use. What does that mean?
It would be that's a great question. It would be in a building with other uses, and those uses on this site would be life sciences. So maybe the bottom 2 floors would be the amenity space and community space, and then above it would be life sciences, office space, above that.
Okay. And then my second question, one of the main things that came up in the first slides when you talked about what are people's concerns is the 25 years of development, and nothing I've seen addresses that. So when does that happen? It seems to me that is the essential issue, at least for many of us.
That's something we can look at more specifically as we draft the precise plan itself and think about its implementation over time. Right now, we're working to get to a project that we can study further, both in the CEQA analysis as well as the precise plan. It's definitely a concern we heard throughout the process.
And what, I guess I just don't understand, why would they want it?
We're moving out of the realm of alternatives questions into other ones, but generally speaking, because there's probably multiple market cycles that happen, so every few years, like it's a hot life science market, then it's not, right? So this is to be phased over time to accommodate part of that life cycle as well as the time it takes to do construction.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your concise questions, because we're really excited to get the open house. So,
Thanks. I had a question about the alternatives. Did I see correctly on the slides that both the alternatives add hotel rooms?
No, it's the same number of hotel rooms.
Okay,
It's
I thought it said plus 104, so.
It's a total of 104. In addition, there's none on the site now, so it's a total of 104,
Okay.
consistent with the.
And then when you're exploring the alternatives, did you explore not having a hotel and trying to move buildings around, or was it always kind of assumed that there was going to be a hotel?
We looked at that as an option, and it still can be part of the feedback you provide to us this evening as to whether or not you think that's on the hotel. There are some benefits to having a hotel on there from a travel perspective. It actually helps to reduce the amount of travel on the site because it helps to internalize some of the trips from the life sciences buildings there, the people who are occupying those hotel spaces overall. So it does have that kind of benefit.
So you've actually done a study about these proposed tenants and how much travel they have from people coming from out of town and staying, or are you just guessing about how it would affect traffic?
It's based on our traffic consultants' knowledge of how trips are internalized in projects with a number of uses overall.
And relating to these specific types of businesses that's around travel. Okay, thank you.
thank you, Darren.
Hello, I have a question just real quick about the sea level rise valuation package. What's the number for that?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can't answer that off the top of my head. We will be doing a full community benefits analysis of the proposed project and the project alternative.
Okay, because I understand this is privately funded, according to the developer. So, and they're
So
saying that.
again, we want to ask questions that are related to what we just saw, and then if you have any additional comments, those are going forward. So if we just please keep it focused, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, secondly, how independent is this process from the developers?
We worked internally with the city staff, our team that's here tonight, to work to summarize all the feedback that we heard on the urban design strategies and to craft those into different approaches that you'll see on the boards this evening. We did work with their design team at HOK, who helped develop their first proposed alternative to make sure that we were doing things that were feasible and made sense given the context and site conditions.
So Longfellow has approved these alternatives.
It's not really my place to say whether they've approved them or not, so to speak, but they have seen these, and their design team was involved in this process.
Okay, thank you.
Quick follow-up for the last one. So Longfellow has seen all of these. They're not like a surprise to Longfellow, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Is there anything that Longfellow has rejected?
I don't know that I can speak directly to that this evening, but we worked with our team to set up these design strategies that you'll see around here tonight to look at these different alternatives.
Okay, cool, thank you. I got a couple others. Hold on.
Okay.
So, so I watched the videos, and in the presentation in option 3, I guess plan 3 or alternate 2, I guess you guys are calling it, you say that you took out 3 buildings, but I only see 2 buildings taken out. I only see the 2 garages were taken out. I don't see a 3rd building that was removed.
There's the building, it was N13, which is here on the site. N13 is this building. It moved from a life sciences building to a garage, and then N12 and N7 were moved.
Oh, I see. So basically, the one on the end there is now a new garage instead of a building? Oh, and that's the, okay, so it's not a reduction in the number of buildings, it's more garage and less buildings for life science. Okay, cool, all right, thank you. I'm gonna keep going, thank you. So Dan already got that one. Oh, and also, so one thing I was curious about was, in the presentation and the videos, you talk about how the buildings are shorter. And what I've seen when looking at this stuff is now I understand the term step back, which is basically making a notch in the building so it doesn't look as big. And then there's setback, which is actually moving things backwards. Which buildings have been reduced in height?
Happy to talk through that, and we have a station on that this evening. We showed a few slides, but my station that I'll be at this evening has an illustration of exactly which buildings were reduced in height in the alternatives.
Okay, cool. That's all I got, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, looks like we have maybe 3 more questions, which is great because I'd love to move us into the open house. So thank you all for your patience.
This is a basic process question. Information about page 1 and 2.
Yes, that's correct.
Great question.
Good evening, and thank you very much for a clear presentation. I also appreciate having had the chance to review the video beforehand. There's a couple of things that I didn't see in there, and I'd like to know how or when they'll be addressed. One is how this site, in particular, given that it's on the slope, will address climate change, sea level rise, groundwork, water incursion, and how the site will be modified for that. Because especially if this thing's going to take 20 years to build plus a few years to get planned, permitted, and constructed, we're going to be in a different world by then. And the second thing is also how and when will artificial light at night, to use a current term, be addressed, because particularly with regard to the hotel, that could, and all the surrounding buildings, will have a huge negative impact on the environment.
Thanks, Chris. We have tonight a station that outlines the strategies identified by Longfellow, both for shoreline protection, it's over here on the side, as well as adaptation associated with the site itself, and those include things related to stormwater, sewer system, with groundwater intrusion as well. So some of that has been developed through their adaptation plans, and we'll continue to work on that through development of the precise plan. Similarly with artificial lights, that'll be something we look at, whether it's, bird safe design on buildings, what the lighting situation is along the slough, and how we can protect the habitat with the standards that we establish within the precise plan.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and just as a reminder, we're gonna have each of these stations, there's gonna be a member of the team at the station, so a lot of these questions could definitely get answered directly in those as well, but we have a few more left here, Mike, correct?
Yep, I'll take this one. So, you mentioned that the heights were reduced a little bit. Did you actually reduce the number of floors in those buildings?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And secondly, was the only thing I didn't hear addressed, and I apologize, I was a little late, the biosafety levels of the buildings. It seems in all the prior proposals, those safety levels have been banned in San Carlos and in Redwood City downtown. Are those still being proposed as parts of these buildings?
We did not talk about biosafety levels tonight, so you did not miss anything. We had a life sciences webinar on February 6th. It's online if you haven't had a chance to see it, where we had speakers to talk a little bit about life sciences in general and some of the regulations at the county level. We haven't, biosafety isn't part of this discussion tonight. We're focused on the urban design strategies, but certainly that would be part of the discussion. We talk about uses in buildings and the types of activities.
So at this point, just to be clear to answer it, nothing has changed with regard to the current expected biosafety levels of the buildings, the use of the buildings that are proposed?
There's been no change because there's not been a discussion of that specifically.
Okay.
The one number that I caught for employees was 3,800. Is that anticipated at build-out? And is that for all the alternatives? It's still going to be 3,800 employees?
So, great question, and I want to clarify that. So, with the build out of the existing campus, it's about 4,000 people, so 3,900 people. That's what's allowed currently. The proposed Longfellow development plan is about 7,000 employees. The smaller alternatives, alternative 1 and 2, would reduce it about 500 or so employees for each alternative as you go down, roughly.
So 6,500 employees,
About 6,000, I think.
6,000 employees.
Roughly.
And they're going to be encouraged to use public transit, blah, 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 blah. Why do we need 6,000 parking spaces then?
Well,
As though each had their own dedicated parking space.
Yeah, that's a great question, because each of the alternatives actually reduces the amount of parking. So alternative 1 and 2 have in the 5,000s, like 5,600, I think, and 5,200 spaces. So I can do it from memory. Same question.
Is there going to be an increase in the elevation of the total building of the land in order to avoid sea level rise? We're really looking down now. Are they proposing to raise the elevation of the site?
Yes. So I will answer that question, but we have 2 more people, and we want to get to the actual.
My question is, if yes, do your visual presentations that you give incorporate that added elevation?
So you're referring to the buildings along the edge here where the potential sea level rise impacts are likely and to be greatest, right? Because these are the lowest points on the site overall. And in those cases, the proposal would be to raise the ground level. We were showing mostly sections from the outside of the area in a different way, not showing those areas that had the raised floor elevations.
So we're quickly eating into time for the open house. We have 2 more here, so I hope these are the final 2. Thank you so much for your concise questions. Again, we're going to have folks at each one of these stations to answer a lot of these questions that are coming up, and keep over to you.
Thank you, thank you. I want to ask you the burning question, I suppose, which might be on everyone's mind, certainly at the top of my mind, which is you've shown 2 alternatives that are like 10% reduction and maybe 20% reduction. But what I think I heard from all the residents was like either no project, or I was expecting to walk in here and see a 50% reduction. Or 30%. I'm a little puzzled by the 10% reduction and the 20% reduction. What about, this is a community process. This is in response to the community's concerns. The alternative that is presented is supposed to represent what the community might be willing to accept. They wanted 2-story buildings. They wanted no additional traffic. They did not want 2 million square feet added. So my question to you is, where the heck did alternative 1 and 2 come from if it didn't come from the community? So
Okay, so thank you for the comments, and to answer your
sorry,
question.
I had to bring it up.
Well, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So when we went through the process of taking community feedback and hearing from folks about the buildings are too close or the buildings are too high, we need to reduce the visual impact, right? We heard all those things, and you can see those rippling through the alternatives. So as we did that, we were pushing building area around the site, pushing some of it down, pushing some of it back overall, and this is where you get to when you do those things. We're here to take comments from folks tonight, so if you feel like it's not as responsive as you think it should be, we have a station related to that over here. I will be there tonight, so you can talk to me about that.
We'll definitely do that. The other question I had was, the 25 years, that was really a huge issue for the community. The phasing is not anywhere. So it's sort of like, honestly, forgive me if I'm being a bit critical, but you've cherry-picked the issues that can be addressed easily with a 10% reduction or 20% reduction. Some of the concerns are very, very deep and a lot more serious. The 25 years of construction, the size of the project, the amount of traffic it's going to generate with the number of people added.
As noted, this is just clarifying questions. You have plenty of opportunity to get feedback around it. Yeah, thank you. We'd like
I'd like her to have a chance to ask her question, please.
She did.
I don't think she was finished.
Were you done? Gita, did I take that away from you too early?
Are you done, Gita?
I took enough time.
I would let her speak for herself. She handed me the
She
mic.
speaks for a lot of us.
She speaks
Thank
for a
you.
lot of us. If you notice the applause.
No answer for these questions, so I'm quite clear.
What's that?
Nobody answered these questions. These are the important questions that the community wants to answer.
She made some comments, and we're asking for you all to give us your feedback on the board. We'd like each person to have an opportunity.
There's
to give us
nowhere on the
feedback.
board that says we don't want the
Go ahead.
project.
Bob,
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for your presentation, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're talking about the growth, I mean, it's a lot of square footage and a lot of employees coming to work here moving forward. My question or concern is, what infrastructure is gonna be supported, like through police and fire? I don't think I've heard that unless I missed it somewhere. Can someone address that?
Great question. So we will look at that in two independent ways. It's not on any of these boards tonight, to make that clear. We are doing a fiscal impact study as part of this project for the proposed development project from Longfellow, as well as the alternative, to understand the implications for all city services, including police and fire.
Well, I mean, there's ramifications as far as what that's gonna cost, and as a resident of Redwood City, we would probably all bear the brunt of that, I would assume.
We will study that as part of the process. I will say that non-residential development usually is a plus benefit for the city, meaning that the revenue generated from a project tends to exceed the costs associated with services. However, we are going to be studying that very specifically in this process, again, the proposed proposed project as well as the alternative.
And which of those services actually go to Redwood Shores? I mean,
looks like
we
we
know
have
they go to
one-
Redwood City, but
Let's-
we don't think they go to Redwood
We
Shores.
set up this process so that everyone has equal opportunity to contribute. I
You guys have your rules, and you're trying to pigeonhole us in again and not letting people
One
talk.
more question here, and then I'd really love to open this up so that you all can visit these stations. Most importantly, give us your feedback.
We're tired of stations, we're tired of stickers, and we're tired of being corralled.
Yeah, we give our best time and comments, and we're getting plans that we're just taking.
You're getting played off.
Sorry.
You're getting played off right now. Here comes the hook.
I can use the little break.
I don't know where it came from.
You got played off.
Yeah, we just are getting the plans that we did not anticipate. Hunters, we said there's just no business for hotel here. The one closed, and the others changed hands like I don't know how many times since I moved here. There's no need for a hotel, that's for sure. But has anybody given a thought to the notion that this is a landfill area, right? It is a toxic landfill area, right? And you're proposing to put like high rises of life sciences with, and no, we don't even know what level, right? So with all the pathogens, viruses, whatever, that they can have in there, and just up in the hills, we have an active fault line. This is active seismic area. Has anybody given a thought that this is just a disaster waiting to happen? How is anybody gonna leave the shores if something happens? We only have 2 roads, and you're proposing to bring, what, 5,000 people here additional? Nobody's gonna take public transportation here, because there is none. Right. It's far from the whatever $80 million that Longfellow is waving at the city, that's gonna be peanuts compared to what's gonna be sued if it's a disaster. It's not if, it's when, because Mother Nature is always stronger than any engineering. So has anybody given a thought to that? You don't have to really answer, because clearly nobody has.
A number of those issues will be studied further as we go through this process in the environmental impact report process, for example. I totally understand you guys are frustrated with the process, and my hope is that now we're at a point in the meeting where we try to answer a bunch of questions as we can for all of you. We want your feedback on these alternatives. We would like to hear what you think about them specifically, whether we hit the mark, whether we didn't hit the mark, where we can improve, what's not enough. And that's really the intent of us being here this evening. And hopefully you all will choose to participate in those activities. I understand that you feel like you don't necessarily want to do another dot exercise or another statement exercise, but we are honestly here to hear your feedback and to get feedback on these options. This is your opportunity to share with us your opinions on these. So, again,
Yeah, you guys, you're not taking like general feedback.
The community wants to continue this forum, this mode, not to separate us and look at this thing separately. Why don't you listen to the community for once?
Right? Yeah.
Can we have a wave of hands on the alternatives here? Which way we want to continue the meeting?
Yeah, actually, who wants to go to individual boards and ask questions there? Raise your hands, please, if you want to do that.
Can you please not take
Okay,
over
raise
the
your
meeting?
hands, please, if you'd like to have a big open
Sir,
forum
please,
instead.
Please, this is not appropriate. As we said before,
This has been brought up multiple times, and you guys have not listened. Instead, you keep sequestering us into little groups. I'm not going to participate in your little groups. Nobody wants to do it.
Listen, please, this is not appropriate to be screaming out, okay? We're again trying to create a safe space for those that want to contribute safe